Squad, it's your girl Dominique, and I am back with another video. This video is a little bit different than my normal videos, so I'm going to show you how I make my bonnet. So sometimes you want to put a bonnet on your hair because you have braids in, twist in, or whatever protective style that you have on your head. Sometimes those bonnets that you go to the beauty supply store or wherever you go and get your hair supplies from may not have a bonnet that will fit over everything that you're trying to cover up. So I went on ahead and made myself and my daughter some hair bonnets, and I wanted to show you how I did that today. So first off, these are some materials that you will need. You always want to make sure that you have the end lining to be a satin fabric, which mine is satin. The outside, you can have it be cloth, satin. You can do, satin on both sides if you want to. Have it reversible, that's fine. Me, personally, I have my cotton print here that I'm going to do because I'm actually making this for someone else. And this is the print that they wanted. You also want to have some hair pins. See, this is what happens when you do hair too much. You want to have some straight pins to be able to hold your fabric in place. So when you're getting to the sewing machine, you don't have to worry about it sliding out of place or whatever the case may be. You want to have some elastic, and I'll go over the measurements later. You want to have a cutting tool. You can use a rotary cutter just like this one, or good old-fashioned scissors. They will work just as well. Now, me myself, I have this piece of chalk here, which is called Taylor's chalk, which I use to be able to outline my patterns and things like that, just to make it a little bit easier on me. You don't necessarily need this if you have a steady hand, but it is good to have on hand. So you want to have something that you can measure with, because you need to have a certain length of your fabric so you can make sure that it fits for you or whoever that you're making it for. And then also what I have here is wax paper. Now, a lot of people have the actual paper that you use to make patterns on. I just have good old wax paper in my cabinet, so this is what I use, and I'll show you how to do this as well. Okay, so here I have my wax paper, and depending on what size you want, which this size that I have here is a 13-inch bonnet, and it will fit an average adult size head, which sounds bad, but some people have bigger heads, some people have smaller heads, whichever may work for you. And of course, by knowing that, you need to measure the outside of your head, the perimeter of your head, so you know if you want it tighter or loose or whatever you want for your bonnet to fit on your head. What I have found out that for my particular head, 13 inches is how wide I have to make the bonnet. Now, that's not saying from one end to the other end it is 13 inches. These are fold lines, and I will show you how to fold the fabric. So this needs to be along a fold, and this needs to be along a fold. And then we'll cut. But I will show you how to do that. Now, how to get this wax paper this wide, I had to take two separate pieces of wax paper, and what I did here is I actually taped them together because my wax paper wasn't wide enough to be able to make a full perimeter to actually fit on the paper. So I used my ruler, and of course we're at 1 inch. So I used the straight line that was already on there on both sides, and I took from 0, of course, up to 13 inches, and slowly what I did was I took it where my mark is here, and I went and made little dots all the way around. And when I was done, I connected those dots, and then that's how I cut out my actual pattern itself. This was already here, this line was already here. All I did was made the actual circle portion. So here I have one of my fabrics laid out, just single laid out, and I will show you how to fold it. So what you want to do to be able to get a fold on one side and a fold on the opposite side, you want to fold it one time like a hot dog. And line the ends up together. And smooth it on out. And then you want to fold it over like a hamburger. I know we all know what these terms are. We've been in school. So you fold one time like a hot dog, and then the second time like a hamburger, and then you come up with this nice square. Now, of course, I don't want to cut this out. I don't want this on my pattern, so I want to make sure that I have enough space to stay away from this frayed edge right here. So, as you can see, we have fold lines here, which of course is double fold, but it's still a fold. And then you have that single fold on this side. That's what we want. This will be where our point goes for our pattern. And you're going to line it up. And you see how far we are? So that's a good thing, because we don't want this on our pattern. So this is where the tailor's chalk comes in handy. You can draw and trace it out on your actual pattern, and it will leave that print for you just to keep it easy if you don't. So as you can tell, right here is where my tailor's chalk is, and I just cut along that. After you've cut along that edge right there, this is what you come up with. And then after you do that, you want to go ahead and do your satin lining the same way. Here we have our two pieces, and when you unfold it, you come out with two circles. So one circle and two circles. All right. Top liner, we're going to lay it down flat with our print facing up. So we want our print facing up. You have the dole side, which most patterns you can, on most fabrics, you can tell which side is the wrong side and which side is the right side. So the right side facing up. And then for satin, you have the shiny side, and then you have the less shiny. Of course, this light is making it look shiny, but if you know what satin looks like on the inside, you know there's a shiny side and then there's a less shiny side. You're going to put the shiny side down, so it's going to face your actual liner. I mean your top fabric, I'm sorry. So the shiny side is going to face the top fabric. Alright, so this is where our pins come in. We're going to pin all along the outside of the actual circle. Now, we're going to keep at least an opening where we're not going to have pins, because we're not going to sew that part up. This is how I remind myself to start here and stop here. I take my pins, and when I'm putting them on my fabric, instead of going sideways, I do it the opposite way. So along the outside, what I'm going to do is line them sideways, like so. So these are going this way for my start and stop, and these are going this way, so I know this is the part that I still need to continue to sew. And then I do that all the way around, and I will come around to the other end to show you where I stop. From my last pin to my start pin, I have this much space left. So the last pin that I'm going to put it in just like my start pin. just so it reminds me, okay, you have to stop here, don't go all the way. And I'm going to put it in toward my project. So now I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and I am going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can use as big or as small of a seam allowance as you would like, but just keep in mind, the more of the seam allowance that you have, the less you have for this bonnet to be. So if you go larger in your seam allowance, you got to realize that this is all you're going to have. So the smaller your seam allowance, the more you will have for this bonnet to fit. Alright, so as you can tell, I sewed, a little difficult to see on this print, but I started here and I left open the gap over here. That's how much I have. Now, you can trim up as much as you want, as close to the thread as you want for the inside. Well, this is technically going to be on the inside because we're going to flip it inside out. So if you want to trim this up, you can do that and get it as close as you want to that thread. Just make sure that you don't cut your thread, okay? And as you can tell, some was a 1/2 inch, some was 1 inch. Honestly, this is a very simple project, and it doesn't have to be as precise, say if you were doing a shirt or a pair of pants or anything. So that's okay if you mess up a little bit. What you do is go around and trim up a little bit of this outside fold right here. And I am going to cut off our tails from where we started it in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take it, and where we have that hole, we're going to pull everything in. So everything is technically going to be right side out, so we're going to turn it inside out, but to have all the right sides on the outside. And what you want to go ahead and do is take this to the ironing board and pull out as close to the seam as you possibly can and iron it. Alright, so just a little tip with ironing this out. Make sure that you don't iron on the satin side, because satin does burn sometimes if you don't have your iron set to the precise temperature. If you, of course, have double satin, just be careful when ironing it out, just to help you out. But when you do have, because I've done it myself, when you have double satin, it is harder to do this if you don't iron this out. So how I did it with the double satin, I just kind of held my iron over my project and let the steam hit it a little bit, and then, you know, use my hand to flatten it out how I needed it to flatten out, and that worked just as fine for me. So with this all flattened out, what I am going to need to do is we're going to make our inside line. So what it's going to be is our casing for our elastic to go through. Now, depending on what size elastic that you are using, so the elastic that I am using is a 1/2 inch thick. So when you make this case, depending on if you have 1 inch thick, if you have 1/4 of an inch, whatever thickness of elastic that you want to use, it's fine. You just want to make sure that you go a little bit wider than your elastic. So this is a 1/2 inch I'm going to sew in 1 inch for that inside seam. If you have 1/4 of an inch, go 1/2 inch. So therefore, you know, you can make sure you have enough room to slide your elastic. All right, so see, you can still see that we still have our opening here, and it is sewed all the way around on the outside still, but our inside seam we have sewed. So if you want the thread to blend in as best as possible with whatever project you are doing, the best thing to do is to match your thread to your fabric. This is black fabric, so most people would use black for the actual thread, so you can't. So the easiest way I have learned to do feeding through an elastic is to take a safety pin, and you're going to attach it to one end of your elastic, like so. And you're going to feed this through the opening of our project. While you are feeding this through, you want to make sure that you keep it flat and it doesn't turn. I'm just going to fan it, pull it through. And now what you don't want, I'm going to show you now before I start getting down the line. What you don't want is for the end to go through. So what I do is I connect the elastic to whatever project I'm doing with another safety pin, just to ensure that it doesn't slide through. So when you fed it all the way through, you want to take the end off of your project, like so. Take that off. And then take the safety pin that is actually holding the elastic that you fed through off as well. Just making sure that you keep it held how it is fed through. So like I said, once again, you don't have any turns or anything in your elastic. And I'm going to take a straight pin and hold it together. Like so. So from here, what we want to do is to connect the elastic together so that it doesn't just pull when you try to put on and take off your bonnet. It doesn't just slide all on the inside, and then honestly all your work was for nothing. So I'm going to put a stitch in the actual elastic to hold it together. Now I go back and forth a few times. I go maybe 3 or 4 times back and forth just to secure the elastic. Alright, so we have to put a seam just to close up our bonnet. So you're going to get as close to the edge as possible, and you're just going to sew right along the edge to close that up. Alright, so after you have sewed closed that seam right there, you just smooth your bonnet out. And there you have it, where you have a satin lined bonnet. A couple of tips that I can give to you are, you saw that I used a 13-inch for an average adult head. For say a child's head that is in say elementary school or something like that, what I used, because my daughter is 7 years old, I used 9 inches for hers, and it came out perfect. So when you are cutting out your elastic, make sure that you are measuring the person's head so you know how many inches to be able to cut your elastic. For this particular bonnet, I used 22 inches. My person's head was 21 inches, and I went over an extra inch just to be able to overlap my elastic, so when I sewed it down to keep it together, I didn't lose and it didn't get too tight for the person themselves. Is that before you go to the sewing machine, get everything cut out, everything squared away, so when you are at the end of making your project, sewing is the very last thing that you have to do, so you don't have things all over the place, because it's a lot easier to do projects and things like this when you are very organized and things are all together and not all over the place. So I thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you. Bye.